Here's the question that really sits at the heart of this entire topic.
Yeah.
Why does the idea of extraterrestrial life persist so strongly, so globally, when there is a complete absence of certain proven evidence? We're talking about a belief system that thrives not just despite a lack of hard data, but you could almost argue because of it. If the evidence is effectively zero, why is the belief itself so foundational?
That is the profound question, isn't it? And what the source material we've looked at suggests is that we have to reframe the premise entirely. The belief in aliens, it doesn't grow from proof.
Right.
It grows from a deep, ancient, cultural, and psychological expectation. And this expectation, it's been built layer by historical layer over thousands of years.
So you're saying we expect to find them?
We've been trained to expect them. We often assume that the default state of the human mind is to look up at a silent, empty, indifferent universe.
Sure, that feels modern, scientific.
Yeah, it does. But if you look closely at the history, the concept of a truly empty cosmos is actually a very recent invention. And maybe more importantly, it seems to be fundamentally unbearable to the human mind.
Wow. That is a massive paradigm shift right there. So we're not starting this deep dive looking for evidence that visitors are here now.
No, not at all.
Instead, we're going to examine the historical, the narrative infrastructure that actually trained humanity to expect the visitor. We're looking at the psychological and cultural preparation that happened long, long before the first flying saucer ever flew.
Exactly. The belief in extraterrestrial life today is simply the latest, most rationalized version of humanity's persistent refusal to accept cosmic solitude. The narrative form changes, from a spirit to a scientist, from a chariot of fire to a flying saucer.
But the underlying function is the same.
The function remains constant. It fulfills the psychological need that was once handled by gods and angels and vast creation myths. The sky for us has always been populated.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive, then, is to trace that expectation. We're going to go all the way back to the ancient world, watch how this belief shifts through the scientific and industrial revolutions, and then
we detail that critical moment, 1947.
Exactly. When that long-held cultural expectation finally met a perceived reality, giving birth to the modern UFO era. And for you, the listener, you need to see how culture had already scripted this entire encounter decades, even centuries in advance. That brings us right to our starting point, this core psychological thread. The source material we're looking at suggests that humans are, for lack of a better term, wired to see the heavens as alive. We look back through time, and the sky was never empty, ever. It was always a teeming, active place populated by beings that were intelligent, powerful, and very much not human.
It's a crucial historical truth. Before, say, the 17th century, that boundary between Earth and heaven wasn't a sharp scientific line.
It was porous.
It was a permeable, living membrane. Pre-modern societies never, ever imagined the cosmos as a void. They created what the sources we've read call the populated sky. Every major celestial body, the sun, the moon, the stars, they all possessed immense agency. And this wasn't just, a poetic metaphor.
No, this was their cosmology. This is their reality.
It was their functional cosmology.
Yeah.
It defined their daily lives.
So let's start with a really clear example. Ancient Egypt. How profoundly did they see that celestial realm as being alive and dynamic?
Oh, for the Egyptians, the heavens were in constant, meaningful motion. The sun god Ra didn't just passively exist up there.
Right.
He sailed across the sky in a massive solar bark. He was engaged in a constant nightly battle against the forces of chaos, only to be renewed and reborn each morning. The sky itself was the body of the goddess Nut, stretching over the world.
Who would swallow the sun at dusk and then birth it again at dawn?
Precisely. It's a biological, living cosmos. But what's particularly relevant for our deep dive here is the role of the stars.
The stars weren't just burning balls of gas.
Not at all. The stars were the transfigured spirits of the blessed dead.
So they were souls.
They were transformed souls. This wasn't some distant, impersonal realm of deities you couldn't relate to. This was a vibrant, inhabited extension of their own civilization. It meant the upper realm was populated by recognizable, if transformed, beings who could travel freely and who maintained a link between the mortal and the immortal worlds.
So the concept of cosmic solitude it didn't exist.
It was impossible. The heavens were just another neighborhood. A very powerful, very important neighborhood, but a neighborhood nonetheless.
So a visitor from that upper realm, that wouldn't be an exceptional reality-shattering event. It was built into their daily religious reality.
It was expected.
They weren't extraterrestrials in our modern sense, but their function as these powerful non-human intelligences coming down from above to influence events. That's the same narrative role we give to aliens today.
Precisely. They provided interaction, meaning, and a sense of cosmic destiny. Now, if Egypt saw the heavens as a dynamic, mythical body, Mesopotamia introduced a new layer of, well, of cosmic administration.
Administration. That feels very modern, doesn't it? Like a bureaucracy.
It's surprisingly modern. In Mesopotamia, especially with the Babylonians and Assyrians, the heavens weren't just populated, they were governed by a structured divine bureaucracy.
A celestial court.
A celestial court, yes. The great sky god Anu presided over it. And this is where we get the idea of constant systematized surveillance from above. Stars and planetary movements weren't just data points for farming. They were dispatches. They were messages sent from this upper world, indicating the intentions and movements of these divine administrators.
So who was doing the monitoring? Who was watching humanity?
Well, the sources detail the function of the watchers, or divine observers. Their job was to monitor human behavior, report back to that celestial court, and crucially, to occasionally intervene in human affairs. They might warn a king of impending doom, or they might be sent to administer a punishment. This established a deep, ancient sense of cosmic surveillance that, it really does underpin so much of the modern UFO mythos.
The assumption being that whatever lives up there is organized, it's highly rational, and it's probably watching us.
And it might possess knowledge that we lack. The idea that beings watch us from above and occasionally intervene, that's a core narrative thread. It carries directly into the modern alien myth, whether the watchers are wearing, divine robes or silver space helmets.
It creates this expectation of accountability, that our actions have cosmic repercussions.
Yes. And moving to the classical world, Greece and Rome certainly inherited this populated sky, filling it with their own powerful, often capricious gods like Zeus and Mars. But the sources point to something new happening here, a crucial philosophical rupture that starts planting the seeds of rational extraterrestrial speculation.
The distinction between the divine being and the purely rational one.
Yeah.
This is the start of the plurality of worlds idea.
Exactly. Alongside the religious cosmology, you have early Greek philosophers who start asking questions based purely on material observation and logic. They sort of bypass the gods entirely.
You're talking about thinkers like Anaximander and later the atomists?
Democritus and Epicurus, yes. They proposed a staggering idea. They said if matter atoms is infinite and it's constantly moving and combining,
then there must be an infinite number of worlds, constantly forming and dissolving.
And if there are infinite worlds,
then life must logically be infinite too.
That is the crucial inference. This is the first purely intellectual step that separates the idea of life elsewhere from a mandatory divinity. It's the philosophical predecessor to all our modern biological and astronomical arguments for alien life.
And later writers like Plutarch, they ran with this, right?
Oh, absolutely. Plutarch explicitly tackled the idea in a work called On the Face and the Moon, where he speculates that the moon might host beings, maybe wiser or stranger than humans, entirely based on the physical presence of that world, not on any theological decree.
So he's looking at the moon as a place, not a symbol.
A physical place.
Yeah.
This planted that first intellectual seed of the modern concept, the non-earthly inhabitant as an outcome of physics, not just of faith.
We should also touch on the Hebrew tradition because it offered a very highly structured, organized view that influenced later Western cosmology so much.
Right. The Hebrew tradition didn't really focus on life on other planets, but it gave us the most hierarchical and complex view of the celestial realm as a bureaucracy again. The sky was seen as a multi-tiered structure, a kind of administrative headquarters for Yahweh.
And figures like the Watchers from the Book of Daniel or the Book of Enoch.
Yes, the Iron, the Watchers, angels who descended to Earth and traveled between these realms.
And what were their specific functions? What's the link to the modern alien?
These Watchers had specific mandates. They recorded human history, they guarded celestial secrets, and this is important, they sometimes imparted forbidden knowledge. They taught humanity things like metallurgy, astrology, various arts, knowledge that was supposedly too advanced for our stage of development.
That is a powerful parallel to modern alien visitation myths. The visitors who bring forbidden technology or superior wisdom or warnings about our own science.
It's the superior, non-human intelligence acting as a teacher or a cautionary influence. It provides a structured mechanism for how forbidden knowledge could be transmitted from a non-human source.
So, to summarize this first part, these ancient celestial beings, They perform the exact same narrative functions that modern aliens often do.
delivering warnings, imparting knowledge, influencing human destiny, acting as these superior intelligences. The function is constant.
The language changes, from angels and spirits to extraterrestrials and technological visitors, but the underlying psychological need is the same.
It is the need to alleviate cosmic solitude and provide meaning, structure, and accountability in the universe. That remains constant. We are just wired to see the heavens as active and occupied. So that brings us to this great project of the 17th century, the transition from a mythological, populated sky to a material, physical, and still populated universe.
Right, this is where that spiritual boundary just dissolves and the heavens become subject to the same physics as Earth.
Exactly.
Let's focus on that critical rupture.
Mhm.
Because Copernicus was abstract, right? It was a mathematical shift. But the real sensory shock came from Galileo, who proved the heavens were imperfect,
Yeah.
which seems counterintuitive to how we think of his work today.
It was a revolution based entirely on imperfection. Before Galileo, the dominant model, the Aristotelian one, held that the cosmos was split in two.
Right, you had the corruptible, messy Earth made of the four elements.
And then you had the celestial realm, which was perfect, unchanging, made of an incorruptible fifth element, the quintessence, all held in place by perfect crystalline spheres. This perfection made life on the moon impossible because it would be inappropriate for a perfect sphere to host messy, corruptible biology.
And then Galileo points his, what was probably a pretty crude telescope at the sky.
And when he published his findings in Sidereus Nuncius, the starry messenger, he reported something absolutely devastating to that old view. The moon was not a smooth, perfect sphere.
He saw geography.
He saw geography. He meticulously documented its features, jagged mountains, deep craters, and shadows that proved it possessed height and depth. He proved that celestial bodies were, for all intents and purposes, earthly. Rough, imperfect, subject to the same physics of light and shadow as a mountain here on Earth.
The spiritual boundary just evaporates. The sky isn't divine anymore, it's geology.
Exactly. And if the moon has geography, it has terrain. If it has terrain, it is a world. And if it's a world, it must be subject to the laws of nature and therefore potentially the laws of life. The question of life on other worlds immediately became unavoidable and intellectual.
And that only deepened when he reported seeing those 4 small points of light orbiting Jupiter.
Which proved that Earth was not the unique center of all rotation in the cosmos. Other worlds had their own attendants.
So if the moon is a world, what kind of creatures might evolve there? That question leads us directly to Johannes Kepler. He's standing right on that threshold between the old mystical cosmology and the new physics, and he's instrumental in imagining the first truly natural aliens.
Kepler's Somnium the Dream, which was published after he died, is a cornerstone text for this deep dive. He uses the story of a journey to the moon, guided by a demon, to explore what lunar life might be like as a physical reality. He wasn't just inventing monsters, he was applying the emerging laws of physics to biology.
Tell us more about these lunarians he imagined. How do they demonstrate this concept of alien naturalism?
Well, Kepler was a brilliant astronomer. He knew the moon has extremely long days and nights equivalent to 14 Earth days each. So he concluded that any life there must be adapted to those extremes.
It's a logical deduction.
It is. He imagined 2 main races, the Subvulvani and the Privulvani. The Subvulvani lived on the side of the moon that's always facing Earth, so they were shielded from the harshest direct sunlight. They were more stable. But the Privulvani, on the far side,
They had it rough.
they did. He imagined them as nomadic, gigantic beings that migrated constantly, hiding from the brutal, prolonged daylight by burrowing deep into the lunar soil or migrating into the shadows of mountains. They were shaped by their environment.
And this is the critical step. Life is now seen as a natural outcome of physical conditions, gravity, light, temperature, not just divine placement.
It showed that difference did not imply supernatural origin. Difference implied biological adaptation. Kepler's inhabitants weren't angels or mythological beasts. They were biological responses to their physical conditions. This was an early, deep application of naturalism to extraterrestrial speculation, making life elsewhere a logical consequence of a physical universe.
So if Galileo proved the moon was a world,
Then Kepler provided the logical proof that life on it should be possible and different.
this laid the rational groundwork for the entire Enlightenment. By the 17th and 18th centuries, believing in a plurality of worlds moved from being a philosophical possibility to, well, an article of intellectual maturity.
It really did. By the Enlightenment, doubting extraterrestrial life was seen as intellectually stubborn. a parochial, small-minded refusal to accept the true scale of the universe.
And you have figures like Bernard Le Bovier de Fontenelle, who took this idea and made it popular, right? He made a dinner table conversation.
His book, Conversations on the Plurality of Worlds from 1686, was a runaway bestseller across Europe, and his tactic was brilliant.
How did he do it? How did he make it so socially respectable?
He used witty conversational prose. The whole book is a dialogue between a philosopher and a beautiful, intelligent Marchioness. He didn't just state the facts. He imagined the extraterrestrials as neighbors. He discussed what they might be like based on their distance from the sun.
So Martians, being farther from the sun, would be
Stern and practical. Venusians, closer to the heat, would be passionate and artistic. He removed the remaining theological stigma by making the whole concept fun, elegant, and accessible.
He turned them from abstract concepts into variations on the human theme, all shaped by environment.
And this aligned perfectly with the powerful rational arguments of the age. Thinkers like Christian Huygens and later Immanuel Kant, they argued that nature does not indulge in singularities. Meaning, if a natural law like gravity or motion operates everywhere, and since Earth is clearly not unique, then life must be universal too. To deny it, they argued, was to imply that God or nature was wasteful, creating countless worlds only to leave them barren and empty.
The foundation for belief had shifted entirely. It was no longer myth or faith. It was now rational, scientific, logical probability.
We've moved from celestial beings influencing our destiny to rational, adapted beings just existing somewhere else. And that sets the stage perfectly for the 19th century, when these rational expectations finally gave the alien its first modern technological face, specifically on Mars.
The Victorian era was defined by two things, really. Massive technological ambition, transcontinental railroads, global communications, and this creeping existential anxiety about resources.
And that cultural backdrop is exactly what shaped how 19th century astronomers interpreted these ambiguous patterns they started seeing on the red planet.
Which brings us to the famous Martian Canal mirage, starting with Giovanni Schiaparelli in 1877. He reported seeing these long, thin lines on the Martian surface, which he called canali.
And this is where linguistic and cultural context just completely overrides observation. The Italian word canali simply means channels. It implies natural formations, like riverbeds.
But that is not how it was translated.
No. When the word was quickly translated into English as canals, the meaning immediately shifted from a natural phenomenon to an intentional engineered structure. The assumption was now non-human intervention.
But it took the charismatic astronomer Percival Lowell to take that optical illusion and really turn it into a full-blown modern civilization myth.
Lowell was crucial. He was wealthy, he was passionate, and he was relentlessly dedicated to observing Mars from his custom-built observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona. He didn't just confirm Schiaparelli's lines, he claimed to see immense, intricate networks of geometrically precise canals crossing the entire face of the planet with mathematical regularity.
So he wasn't just seeing ditches, he was seeing intelligent design on a staggering planetary scale.
Exactly. And the story he wove around it became the first truly modern, rational narrative of an extraterrestrial civilization. Lowell concluded that Mars was an old, dying world, suffering from chronic water scarcity.
And the canals.
The vast canal networks were built by a unified, cooperative, and highly rational civilization, struggling collectively to survive by transporting dwindling water from the melting polar caps down to the arid equatorial regions.
This is that Victorian synthesis we mentioned. The Martian engineers were a projection of the era's own fears and ambitions.
Absolutely. Lowell's Martians were a powerful allegory for the Victorians. They addressed their fears of resource depletion, but they also celebrated their hopes for a rational, cooperative, global civilization that uses grand engineering to solve planetary problems. Lowell's Martians were older, wiser, more organized versions of ourselves.
They confirmed that Enlightenment idea that intelligent life would inevitably be rational and probably benevolent.
Or at least benign. This vision permeated the culture. It was everywhere, from political cartoons to children's books.
But just as Lowell provided the benevolent, rational engineer, H.G. Wells immediately provided the necessary, fearful counterpoint in 1898 with War of the Worlds. He took Lowell's stewards and inverted them into ruthless, amoral invaders.
Wells tapped into a different Victorian anxiety. Pure, unfeeling Darwinism combined with technological superiority. Wells's Martians were also driven by survival logic and their dying world, but they were creatures of pure, cold intellect, stripped of any human empathy or morality.
And they didn't come to build. They came in colossal fighting machines.
The tripods, wielding terrifying unknown weapons like the heat ray and toxic chemical weapons.
This established the duality of a modern alien archetype, didn't it? They could be saviors like Lowell's or predators like Wells. But
Either way, they would be technologically superior and hyper-rational, often lacking the messy morality of humanity. And Wells did something critical. He made the threat tangible, immediate, and specifically technological. His novel prepared the global imagination for the fearful, physical possibility of an arrival.
So Lowell and Wells together, they created the emotional and intellectual vocabulary for the 20th century alien encounter.
They did. And that leads us to the final, crucial template setter of the 19th century, the airship wave of 1896 and 97. This phenomenon supplied the concrete pattern for how to interpret aerial mystery, decades before the term UFO even existed.
The airship wave is vital. The public was so hyper-aware of revolutionary potential at that time. You had Edison, Tesla, the Wright brothers were on the horizon. Functional flight was just out of reach.
The public was poised for a technological marvel to appear in the sky.
So what did people start reporting across the U.S.?
Well, beginning in California in late 1896 and then sweeping across the Midwest, people reported seeing these large, cigar-shaped or dark, elongated objects passing overhead. They moved slowly, deliberately, and often silently.
And they had features that were just impossible for the time.
Witnesses frequently described bright searchlights sweeping the ground, and the craft exhibited movements that defied known physics. They could change direction sharply against the wind or just hover perfectly still.
The sightings were inexplicable, but, and this is the key point, the cultural lens they were viewed through was entirely human and technological.
Precisely. Because the concept of the extraterrestrial technological visitor hadn't fully matured yet, the public instinctively reached for the most plausible, modern explanation. This craft must be the secret, marvelous invention of a lone genius inventor.
An eccentric millionaire, like someone from a Jules Verne novel.
Or a secret military experiment being conducted in absolute secrecy.
So, an inexplicable aerial phenomenon is immediately assumed to be technologically advanced, and crucially, being kept secret by some authority. That is the fundamental template.
That template advanced technology plus high-level secrecy was forged during the airship wave. Witnesses were trying to describe a machine they had no vocabulary for. They'd say it slid through the air like a fish or moved like a bicycle.
And when occupants were seen, they were often mundane.
Right. They were described as human pilots in normal clothes, sometimes asking for water or fuel. This blend of the mundane and the impossible created this atmosphere of profound ambiguity.
Which the media absolutely loved.
The newspapers, chasing readership, turned local reports into national spectacles overnight. But the mystery just deepened because the airship wave tapered off in the spring of 1897 without any resolution.
No inventor stepped forward.
No government agency offered an explanation. The phenomenon just vanished, leaving behind this invisible framework in the public consciousness. The sky holds advanced technological secrets, and authority is withholding the truth. That invisible framework was in place, just waiting to be activated.
After the airship wave, the sky seemed to go quiet again. But this quiet sky from the start of the century to 1947 was anything but silent. The cultural programming that would launch the UFO era was actively happening, reinforced by new media and cultural movements that were refining the alien narrative.
The silence was very deceptive. The belief systems were being actively maintained and refined. Technology was providing new ways to contact the alien, and pulp fiction was providing the visuals and the anatomy.
Let's start with radio. Nikola Tesla provided the first major narrative twist in this period, shifting the alien from a physical visitor to a disembodied signal.
In 1899, while he was experimenting with high-voltage transmissions in Colorado Springs, Tesla claimed he detected these curious rhythmic bursts that defied any known explanation. He speculated, and he was careful not to claim certainty, that these might be communications from a neighboring world, specifically Mars.
And the press just seized on that.
Oh, immediately. Headlines declared Tesla had heard from the Red Planet, and this established a new, abstract narrative. The alien as a communicator, someone humanity might detect long before they ever visit. Contact could be silent, technological, and happen through invisible electromagnetic waves.
It sort of democratized contact.
It did, in a way. For the first time, a major scientific figure suggested humanity had a tool radio that could reveal we have company in the cosmos. Even without confirmation, the idea took hold. It maintained that sense of cosmic surveillance, but added a new layer of potential engagement.
But that abstraction didn't last very long, did it? Thanks to the explosion of cheap visual fiction, the pulp magazines of the 1920s and 30s.
The pulps were absolutely crucial. This is where we need to delve into the visual depth. Before the pulps, extraterrestrials were philosophical concepts like Kepler's Lunarians or literary characters like Wells's Martians. But the pulp's titles, like amazing stories and astounding science fiction, they provided the anatomical, visual, and narrative scaffolding that normalized the alien encounter.
How did they transform that philosophical concept into a character people could recognize?
Through vivid, cheap cover art. Artists were constantly tasked with illustrating the incredible, and they developed a visual grammar for the unknown. They gave the alien a body, often grotesque or insectoid.
The famous bug-eyed monster.
That archetype emerges right here. It combined the fear of the unknown with the fear of technological invasion. And they also cemented the image of the spacecraft itself, moving away from the Victorian airship concept towards sleek, metallic, smooth discs, rockets, and dome-shaped saucers. They provided the specific visual template for 1947.
So countless readers grew up with this visual and emotional landscape of alien life fully realized. They were trained to know what an alien encounter should look and feel like.
The pulps turned the abstract question of life elsewhere into an immediate, dramatic character study. And they cemented the idea that space travel was inherently violent, or at least challenging. Mars was full of warlords, Venus was full of monsters. The cosmos was a dangerous place.
So while the pulps provided the terrifying physical alien, you had spiritual and occult movements at the same time, ensuring the alien remained a figure of moral significance. We're talking about theosophy.
Yes. Theosophy and related movements were hugely popular in the early 20th century, and they rejected that notion of cold, ruthless materialists from space. They posited that the universe was a hierarchy of evolving consciousness.
And that far advanced benevolent spiritual guides resided on higher planes.
Or distant, vibrationally advanced planets like Venus. These were the Great White Brotherhood or Ascended Masters.
This is the space brother archetype. They weren't coming in tripods.
No, they were communicating psychically. Through visions, automatic writing, or channeling, they were often warning humanity of impending peril, trying to guide our spiritual progress, and ensuring we didn't destroy ourselves with our new technology, like the atom bomb.
So you had a complete spectrum of cultural expectation before 1947, the ruthless technological invader on one side.
And the wise psychic guide on the other. If an unexplained object appeared in the sky, the public had two distinct pre-existing narrative frameworks ready to interpret it.
The cultural stage was set, and then these percolating forces met the intense, anxious pressure of World War II. This is where we see the final pre-UFO technological phenomenon, the Foo Fighters.
The Foo Fighters appeared during intense aerial combat. Allied pilots, starting around 1944, began reporting these strange, fast-moving, glowing spheres, often described as red, orange, or silver balls of light that would just keep pace with their aircraft.
And they could maneuver in ways that were impossible.
Agility, unknown to human aviation. They sometimes appeared to play with the planes, and then suddenly they would accelerate away or just vanish.
So in the context of a war defined by rapid, secret technological leaps, V-2 rockets, jet engines, radar, how were these objects interpreted by the pilots?
Almost universally, they suspected they were secret weapons developed by the enemy, either the Germans or the Japanese, and this is crucial. The interpretation reinforced the template established by the airship wave 50 years prior.
The sky holds advanced, unexplained technology.
And that technology is shrouded in high-level secrecy and is potentially hostile. The Foo Fighters confirmed the psychological climate of the era. They proved that technology could advance faster than public knowledge, leading to this profound anxiety and suspicion. By the time the war ended, the public mind was fully primed.
They were used to secret weapons, the visual cues were from the pulps, the spiritual roles from theosophy, and the rational belief in life elsewhere was a century old.
The system was fully charged. The world was experiencing what the sources call a technological upheaval that had fractured the boundary between the scientifically possible and the wildly imaginative.
And the ignition spark for all of it arrived in the summer of 1947. It immediately activated this entire historical and cultural infrastructure we've been detailing. The world was ready. You have post-war trauma fueling anxiety, rampant suspicion of government secrecy, and a culture saturated with alien narratives.
The modern era of the UFO rests on two foundational events. They happened within weeks of each other in the summer of '47, and both became instantly mythological because they slotted perfectly into that pre-existing belief system. First, the sighting that gave the phenomenon its name.
Kenneth Arnold, June 1947. A private pilot flying near Mount Rainier in Washington.
Arnold claimed he saw 9 unusual objects flying in formation at impossible speeds. He estimated it at over 1,000 miles per hour. And crucially, when he was describing their rapid, erratic motion to the press, he used a visual analogy. He said they moved like saucers skipping across water.
He was describing the motion, not the shape.
Exactly. He was describing the motion. But the press took that analogy of movement and turned it into the definitive description of the object. They coined the term flying saucer.
And that name changed everything.
Yes. That single, simple, visual term was a linguistic accident that immediately unified all the previous different reports, the lights, the boomerangs, the cigar shapes, into a single, recognizable phenomenon. The unknown now had a tangible shape and a name everyone could use.
The term was so potent, it created the category it was meant to describe.
It did. Within days, sightings flooded the U.S. press. Arnold's local curiosity became a national obsession. People stopped reporting strange lights. They were now consciously reporting flying saucers, fitting the visual template established by those pulp magazines.
This massive cultural moment was then cemented just 2 weeks later by the second foundational event. This one didn't just give the UFO a shape, it gave it a myth. Roswell.
Roswell is critical. Its enduring legacy lies entirely in the reaction of authority, not in the nature of the debris itself. On a ranch outside Roswell, New Mexico, a local foreman found some peculiar debris. Pieces of foil, rubber, sticks, a strange memory-like metal.
And the local Roswell Army airfield, under immense public pressure from the Arnold sightings, acted swiftly.
They did, and they issued an absolutely extraordinary statement.
They announced they'd recovered a flying disc.
In an initial press release, yes, the RAAF dramatically announced the recovery of a flying disc. This was immediate official confirmation of the popular cultural phenomenon. The Air Force had just validated the entire flying saucer narrative.
But that validation lasted less than 24 hours.
The retraction was immediate and spectacular. Within a day, Brigadier General Roger Ramey appeared at a press conference, claiming the debris was merely the remnants of a conventional weather balloon and a radar reflector. This complete, rapid reversal created a profound and lasting sense of cognitive dissonance and suspicion.
Why is that retraction more important than the debris itself?
Because it solidified the cultural template, the one established by the airship wave and confirmed by the Foo Fighters. It created the foundational narrative of the entire modern UFO era.
Which is?
There are extraordinary, technologically advanced objects in our sky. The government knows what they are. And the government is actively, dramatically, and immediately concealing the truth from the public.
So the Roswell incident defined the relationship between the visitor, the citizen, and the state as one built on institutional suspicion.
It was a profound fracturing of public trust in that post-war world. The public was already primed by Cold War anxiety and secrecy around atomic and jet technology to believe that the military operated with high-level concealment. Roswell provided the central, powerful mythic moment. It ensured that every unexplained aerial phenomenon that followed would be filtered through the lens of a government cover-up. The alien in the modern era became inextricably linked to the state's decision to withhold knowledge. It turned wonder into suspicion.
What a compelling continuum. I mean, we've traced this human need to populate the sky from Ra sailing in his bark and the angelic watchers observing us, all the way to the rational lunarians of Kepler, the engineered canals of Lowell's Martians, the secret tech of the Foo Fighters, and finally, the skip saucer and the immediate myth-making cover-up at Roswell. The modern alien isn't some sudden biological or scientific discovery. It's the logical, rational, and cultural culmination of humanity's persistent refusal to live under an empty sky.
The synthesis is just unavoidable. Humanity transitioned from populating the heavens with divine beings to populating them with rational beings to populating them with technological, secretive visitors. The form changes, angels to Martians to saucers, but the function remains constant.
Alleviating cosmic solitude and reflecting our societal anxieties.
Exactly. The belief structure is ancient. Only the vehicles and the corresponding paranoia surrounding them are modern.
For you, the listener, this matters deeply. Understanding this history of belief allows you to critically analyze every UFO report or new claim that follows. you can recognize the ancient psychological structure that's underpinning the modern technological narrative. The question is never if the sky is populated.
But who we need it to be populated by in that specific historical moment to make sense of our current anxieties.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought. Since the alien myth always mirrors our greatest contemporary anxieties and technological leaps, the Victorian Martian was an engineer fighting resource depletion. The Cold War alien was a secretive government project exploiting high technology.
What anxiety is the current post-digital age alien narrative reflecting about us right now? If they were once silent communicators like Tesla imagined and secretive engineers like Roswell implied, what is the visitor doing today in our era of pervasive data, climate crisis, and the rise of autonomous AI? What is the function of the current myth, and what does it say about the future we fear for ourselves?